Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 5 of my Fire Emblem 6 chapter guide. This is going to be about chapter 5 of Fire Emblem 6. So let's just get right into it. This chapter is pretty straightforward. Um, Before I start talking about my strategy for the chapter and how I like to approach it, I'm just going to mention that there are two different ways to handle this chapter. You can go around to the north, there are two forts, and then you can kind of go around in like a sort of a loop to the boss. You can also just go straight over to the gate that's fairly close to the left of your starting area. Now, if you're trying to run this really fast, this is probably the best way to approach it, but I think this is just really dangerous. I haven't done it very much because I think it's dangerous, and so I won't say that I'm an expert, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, but like 4 units show up once you open the door, and yeah, I just think it's kind of dangerous. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of using this as a strategy for this because it gets really bogged down. Because the enemies that are going to attack you, um, where you would normally go, which is again up to the forts, kind of like bog up around that little choke point, and I don't know. It just to me it doesn't really make much sense to choose that, but you certainly can. I am not an expert on that, so you might want to play around with that a little bit if that's the approach you want to take. The approach I like to take is initially what you want to do is get 2 units on the two forts that are to the north, right? There will eventually be reinforcements coming out of these forts, but that's not important for a long time. What you're going to want to do is hold these forts. So there's a bunch of fighters pretty close to your starting place. Some of them will attack immediately, some of them take a minute to get over there. Also, some nomads will be coming. There's a lot of units you have to fight, and the forts are the best place to hold, basically. At this stage in the game, these are not the calves from the previous chapter that you just can't fight. You also have Rucker now who can handle himself. Marcus, your calves, but you still have to be really careful of fighting these guys. These fighters are really strong, and the forts really give you the avoid you need to make this very consistent. So my recommendation is to basically set up sort of a defense using those two. You can also put like Lou, although you have to be a little bit careful with this because he can be really frail, on like the mountain tile, which can allow him to get some chip damage and maybe some kills. Marcus is great at this. The calves with their swords are great at this. Deke, Rucker can be great. Highly recommend sort of holding here. After a little while, once you've dealt with the fighters and the nomads, all the other units on the chapter are stationary. So eventually reinforcements will start. I would highly recommend keeping 2 units, preferably bad units that you don't want, for the rest of the chapter on those two forts because that'll restrict the reinforcements. There's also a fort just past the house to the left, on the far left, that a brigand is going to come from, and a fort close to the boss that a brigand is going to come from. I wouldn't worry too much about these two reinforcements. It depends on how fast you're going through this chapter. Like, if you're already progressing before these have started, you're probably okay. If they've already started, you may have to take another defensive sort of posture and handle them. But yeah, so, I mean, they are just brigands. They have terrible hit, but, just be cognizant of those reinforcements. The next step of this chapter is some thickets in the middle, and there is a mercenary around there already on the thickets, and some mercenaries and some nomads that will come attack you. Now, this part is really annoying. It's not that it's like super difficult because the mercenaries are not very strong. You can put your units on the thickets, which helps with avoid and defense. The nomads also aren't very strong, but the nomads have really good avoid because they have really high speed. And the mercenaries, man, it is impossible to hit these stupid mercenaries. I would almost recommend like using Silverlance with Marcus or something, because it can be really annoying to fight these units. Just make sure you're being careful. Again, it's not like super difficult, it's just really tedious and annoying because these mercenaries are so strong. But once you get past that point, I mean, make sure you're getting the house, of course. There's actually a pretty useful item in there, the Gant Lance, which is just kind of a stronger, so it's sort of like a steel lance basically, but it's I think a bit better. And then yeah, just head down to the boss. There is a mage down there that can hit really hard. Resistances are really low in this game. I don't know if he has just normal fire, L fire, or something. I think he has L fire, but he can hit really hard. So be aware of that. As far as the boss is concerned, for some reason this game loves to give really high attack units, like berserkers, in this case brigands, killing weapons. So be really careful with this boss. There's a few ways that I like to approach this. You can have Lou chip him down, and then make sure you're rescue dropping him because Lou almost definitely won't be able to take a hand axe hit. You can do the same thing with getting him to pull out his hand axe and then having Rucker take killing edge hits on him. This is probably like the fastest and the best strategy because you want to get Rucker experience, and it is pretty fast. And then again, just rescue drop him out of there so that he doesn't use the killer axe. I mean, his hit will be really bad, but it's just the safest way to do it. And yeah, once the boss is done, you can seize, and that's the end of the chapter. There is one other thing I want to mention because I do use this strategy quite a bit. It's not super important, but it's just a fun little thing that you can do if you want. So as you're going through all this, 2 brigands are going to come from around where the boss is. They'll climb over the mountain and they'll come behind your team. Now you can handle them in a lot of different ways, but what I like to do is to have Roy go stand on the mountain in like the very middle and basically just fight them. Now they have hand axes, so he can't really fight them like straight up, but you can basically just walk back and forth on the mountain tiles and attack the brigands, and the hit from them is so low that it will essentially never hit you. Now again, you can handle these brigands however you want, but this basically means that you never have to deal with them for the chapter, and then you can eventually go rescue Roy with Fanny once you're ready to. I always think about it as like she's picking him up from school. He's playing with his friends, but you can go pick him up and bring him in and seize. So you can get Roy a couple of levels, a little bit of extra experience, and you don't have to worry about those brigands. You can do this with like Deke or Rucker or whoever you want, really. But Roy's also not particularly useful on the front lines, whereas they are. So it's just kind of a nice little, fun thing you can do. It's just what I do personally. It's not super important to the chapter, but I tend to do that quite a bit. So yeah, as I said, this chapter is pretty straightforward. Just make sure that you're not overextending, because if some low percents hit, you can find yourself in some hot water here. And yeah. So as always, thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.